Again, hell and the devils too. Abduction, opposition. There are names that seem like warnings, names that our ancestors gave to certain places, not out of whim, but from experience. In the state of Arkansas, there is a state park known as Devil's Den, the Devil's Lair. For most people, it's just a tourist destination, a place to camp and connect with nature. But for Terry Lovelace, a former United States Air Force sergeant and former Assistant Attorney General, that name became a literal prophecy. What you're going to see today isn't the typical story of flying saucers and benevolent space explorers. This case breaks the mold. It's a story that walks the thin red line separating ufology from demonology. There are no greetings of peace here, there's no pain here, there's manipulation. And there are entities that look more like the demons from medieval paintings than the aliens from Hollywood. Get ready, because we're going to enter the Devil's Lair. Trasnoche Paranormal presents Real Stories, Episode 3. The biggest problem for skeptics in this case is precisely the victim. Terry Lovelace wasn't seeking fame. In fact, he kept silent for more than 40 years. Why? He had a lot to lose. In 1977, Lovelace was a young Air Force sergeant stationed at Whiteman Base, a critical location that housed B-52 nuclear bombers. Years later, he would become a respected lawyer and prosecutor, a man trained in logic, evidence, and judicial truth. In June 1977, Terry and his fellow serviceman, whom we'll call Toby, decided to take a break. They were looking for isolation, silence, and nature, so they chose Devil's Den State Park. What they didn't know is that isolation is a double-edged sword. No one can hear you scream, but no one can see what comes down from the sky or what rises from hell either. They arrived at the park, set up their camp in a high and remote area, far from the tourists, lit a campfire, and started to chat. Everything was normal until the forest died. In paranormal research, there is a term known as the Oz factor. It's that sudden feeling that you've stepped out of our reality. The air becomes heavy, and most unsettling of all, the sound disappears. Terry and Toby noticed that the crickets, the frogs, and the wind suddenly stopped. The silence was so absolute that it hurt their ears. Then they saw it, 3 bright lights dancing in a triangular formation above the tree line. They made no sound and moved in a way that defied physics. Terry remembers feeling a mix of military curiosity and a primitive terror. But before they could react, the triangle hovered above them, a light whiter and purer than anything they had ever seen. It completely blinded them. The next thing Terry remembers is waking up. It was already daytime, the campfire was completely out, cold to the touch, but they were burning up. They had an unbearable thirst, as if they had walked through the desert for days. Their skin was red, burned as if by severe sunburn, even though they'd only been there one night. And worst of all, they didn't remember anything from the last 4 hours. They ran away from the place, didn't talk about it. The fear was so great that they buried the memory, but the body doesn't forget. For decades, Terry suffered from nightmares and anxiety, but he tried to live a normal life until, in 2012, a routine X-ray of his knee revealed the physical horror. The radiologist asked him, "Mr. Lovelace, when did you have surgery to get those metals put in your leg?" Terry had no scars. He had never had surgery on his leg, but the X-ray plate didn't lie. There was a strange object, about the size of a fingernail, deeply embedded in his muscle tissue, accompanied by microscopic wires that looked like sensors. In addition, the bone around the object showed signs of abnormal calcification, as if the body had tried to isolate a violent intrusion. There was something technological inside him, something that had been transmitting or recording for 40 years. Was it this discovery that pushed Terry to undergo regressive hypnosis to unlock those 4 lost hours in Devil's Den? And what he found in his mind were not space scientists. The barrier broke under hypnosis. Terry didn't remember a clean, sterile operating table. He remembered being paralyzed inside a craft. But the entities surrounding him weren't the classic calm grays. No, he called him the Monkey Man. The Monkey Men were small, fast, grotesque creatures. They moved with spasms, scurrying through the shadows, and communicated with guttural sounds, screeches, and growls. Terry described that feeling of absolute evil. He didn't feel like he was being studied. He felt like he was being violated. The most terrifying thing came when the memories went further back. Terry discovered that Devil's Den wasn't the beginning. Those things had visited him as a child. He remembered seeing these horrendous creatures in his room, hiding behind the furniture, watching him with a cold malice. This is where the line blurs. What's the difference between these monkey men who stalk a child in the dark and the goblins or lesser demons of ancient folklore? Terry felt that he had been raised or groomed by them, a process of generational grooming. They hurt him physically, caused him emotional pain, and seemed to enjoy the terror they provoked in him. Terry Lovelace's case at Devil's Den raises an uncomfortable question. For years, we have looked up at the sky hoping for answers from other planets. But researchers like Jacques Vallée or John Keel have already warned us that the phenomenon is not necessarily extraterrestrial, it's interdimensional. Maybe what happened to Terry wasn't a visit from another galaxy. Maybe it was an intrusion from an adjacent reality, a lower dimension. The radiation burns, the physical implants, the smell of sulfur and ozone, the paralyzing terror, and the grotesque appearance of the entities all point to the same origin. In the past, we called them demons and incubi. Today we call them aliens. We changed the label, but the predator is still the same. The next time you're in a forest and the crickets stop singing, don't just look at the sky, look at the shadows around you. Because in places like the Devil's Lair, sometimes what finds you doesn't come from the stars. I'm Hector Rossi, and this story is real. See you next Sunday.